June, present day, Butler County, Nebraska. A little after 4 in the afternoon, and the sky over the gravel road has gone the color of a bruise. Every field in sight is fresh black dirt, plowed clean and combed into rows, and the rain comes down so hard the drops jump back up off the ground. On the tilled quarters, the water is already brown and moving, cutting little rivers that carry the topsoil into the ditch. On one field, it does not. One field stands in a rough green tangle of last year's stubble and rye and weeds nobody cut, and the water there is not running at all. It is walking in, soaking straight down, like the ground is drinking it. Standing on the fence line in a man's canvas jacket 2 sizes too big is a 20-year-old girl named Delia Roush, watching the water disappear into her own field and saying nothing. For months, the men at the elevator had a name for that field. Lazy, they called her first, then careless, then worse. Her neighbor, Garrett Voss, farms the next quarter and told the whole coffee counter she would lose the place her father died holding. 4 inches fell in that 1 hour. His rows washed to the road. Hers held every drop. How does the field nobody worked outlast every field they did? But to understand what she left standing, you have to go back to the spring her father was buried, and the notebook he left behind. If you have ever been told your idea was worthless, this story is for you. Subscribe and tell us where you are watching from. The spring of 2019, Butler County. A gray March morning with the ground still half frozen. Delia Roush was 19 when they lowered her father into the little cemetery north of Rising City, and she went home from the burial and did the chores in her funeral clothes, because the Angus heifers did not know a man had died. Warren Roush had farmed those 420 acres for 31 years. Corn 1 year, soybeans the next. Always the same clean, plowed seedbed his own father had cut. He left her the ground, a mortgage the bank was already watching, and 2 things she kept on the kitchen table. One was a green rain gauge log her grandfather had started in 1966, a column of dates and inches in 3 different hands, every hard rain the family had ever caught. The other was her father's own notebook, the pages soft at the corners where he had drawn the same field over and over, and marked with a stub of pencil exactly where the water cut every June. The northeast corner, the draw below the road, the low spot by the culvert that washed out the beans 3 years running. She sat at that table the night after the funeral and read both books by the kitchen light, her coffee going cold. Same fields, same washouts. 53 years of a family plowing, and 53 years of the same dirt leaving in the same water. She turned to a clean page and started writing. The fall of 2019, Butler County. A warm October afternoon at the co-op elevator north of Rising City. Delia Roush backed her father's grain cart under the leg and climbed down while the men waited their turn along the scale. She had told them at the coffee counter that morning what she meant to do, and word had already run the length of the road. She was not plowing this year. None of it. She had drilled cereal rye and tillage radish straight into the bean stubble, green already showing in rows between the dead stalks. Garrett Voss leaned on his tailgate and grinned. "Warren spent 30 years cleaning that ground," he said. "You are going to bury it in trash and weeds." The co-op agronomist, a heavyset man named Merle Fensky, who sold half the county its tillage passes, laughed with him. "Radishes," Fensky said, shaking his head. "You planning to feed rabbits or raise corn?" Delia did not argue. She had learned that from her father, who answered doubt by writing down dates. She pulled the green log from her jacket and a folded page of her own where she had marked every place the water cut. 53 years, she said quietly. Same dirt left in the same water. Fensky stopped laughing long enough to spit. Delia climbed back up the cart, took the pencil from behind her ear, and opened to a clean page. May of 2020, a raw, wet spring, the ground north of Rising City still cold from a late April rain. Delia Rausch pulled the no-till drill into the standing rye at first light, the residue slick and matted under the openers, and she set the down pressure the way the rented drill came, without changing a thing. That was her mistake, and she wrote it down later in 3 words. Wrong. Too shallow. The rye was thick and green, and holding the moisture like a wet blanket. The corn seed dropped into a slot that would not close, into dirt still down near 50 degrees, and the openers smeared the sidewall instead of cutting it clean. She walked the first pass on her knees, digging seeds out with a finger, and saw the trench gaping open where the mud had not crumbled back over the kernel. 11 days later, the corn came up in patches. A plant here, a bare foot of row there, some seedlings yellow and behind, some never breaking ground at all. Garrett Voss slowed his truck on the road to look, and did not need to say a word. Her stand came up thin, barely half the plants she had drilled for. She did not tear it up. She walked every row with the green log under her arm and the pencil moving, marking the cold slots, the smeared walls, the down pressure she had trusted blind. That fall, the ragged field made little better than half what her father's plowed ground once did. The loss, penciled at the bottom of the page, came to better than $200 an acre. The spring of 2021, a dry, warm May north of Rising City, and Delia Rausch stood in rye grown waist-high because she had waited too long to kill it. She meant to roll it flat and drill soybeans into the mat, and every day she put it off, the rye kept drinking. She pushed a soil probe into the ground and pulled the core and crumbled it between her fingers. Dust halfway down. The living crop had pulled the top foot near dry, the way a green sponge left in a bucket wicks the water up out of the pan beneath it and holds it in its own stems. She wrote it plain that night. Terminated late, robbed the beans. The beans went in behind and came up thirsty. 3 leaves where the neighbors' plowed rows already had 5. Garrett Voss did not even slow his truck this time. It was Ruth Coleman who found her, a retired soil health specialist from the county office. Gray braid, 40 years of walking fields. She pulled into the yard with a cardboard box of old extension bulletins on stubble mulching, some printed before Delia's grandfather started his rain log. "You are not wrong," Ruth said, setting the box on the tailgate. "You are early, and you are alone. Those are different things." She showed Delia the numbers on infiltration from a rainfall simulator she had run for years, tilled tray against residue tray, one sheeting off, one drinking in. Delia copied every figure into the green log by lamplight. How much water had that rye stolen, and could the next rain ever pay it back? An August evening in 2021, north of Rising City, and the rain had come down steady for an hour, and quit. Delia Rausch pulled on her boots and walked the field road while the ditches still ran brown. 2 inches, her grandfather's gauge said, tipped and read by lamplight. Her own rows, drilled into the rolled rye mat, stood clean and green, the ground firm where the water had soaked in. Her uncle Alton Rausch had driven over from Seward to check on her, the way he had since the funeral. He said nothing about the neighbor's washout. He carried a spade into the middle of her field and pushed it in with his boot and turned up a full blade of soil. It came out dark and crumbly, wet clear through, holding together in soft clods with pale root threads running through them. He broke a clod in his palm. 3 fat worms curled in the crumbs, and the channels they left ran down past the spade's reach, the same holes the winter radish had punched and left behind when it rotted. Alton looked at it a long time. He set the clod back down gentle, like it might spill. He did not say she was right. He did not say anything. He wiped the blade on his pant leg, propped the spade against the fence post, and walked back to his truck with his hat pushed off his forehead and the mud still dark on his knuckles. A registered letter reached the Roush mailbox in June of 2022, north of Rising City, and Delia stood at the road with the envelope while the flag was still up. The Drainage District letterhead, 3 signatures, a deadline of 30 days. The words called her standing residue and cover a nuisance, said the rye and radish trash harbored rodents and pests, and claimed the mat was choking the grass waterway that carried runoff off the quarter. Clean it up, disc it under, or face a fine of $500 and a lien on the ground. She read it twice, then folded it into the green log against the page where she had copied Ruth Coleman's infiltration numbers. Garrett Voss had a seat on that board. He had not signed his own name at the bottom, but his was the field that drained across hers, and everybody at the elevator knew who had complained. Then the sky did the district's work for it. The rain quit after planting. 3 weeks, then 5. No measurable fall in her grandfather's gauge, the pond cracking at its edges. Her untilled ground looked no better than anyone's, the residue gone dull and brittle, the corn curling its leaves in the afternoon like every plowed field for miles. Voss leaned on the fence one evening and let himself smile. "All that mess," he said, "and you are burning up same as the rest of us." Delia walked out at dusk with the soil probe and pushed it down past the dry crust to see what the deeper ground still held. And what she pulled up, a July afternoon in 2022, north of Rising City, and the sky went the color of a bruise before 3 o'clock. The wind laid the corn flat, and then the rain came, not in drops, but in ropes, so loud on the tin roof that Delia Roush could not hear her own boots on the porch boards. She stood under the eave with her grandfather's gauge in sight and watched it fill past the 2-inch mark in 20 minutes, past 3, then over the top and running. 4 inches, the radio said later, in a single hour. She pulled her hood up and walked the fence line while it still poured. Across the wire, Garrett Voss's clean-tilled field had turned to a brown river. The loose-worked dust had sealed under the first hard drops, and now the water ran off the top in sheets, carrying the black topsoil down every furrow into the road ditch, where it piled in fans of silt against the culvert. She turned to her own ground and stopped. The rolled rye mat lay dark and soaked, and the water was not running across it. It was going straight down, into the wormholes and the old radish channels, the way rain goes into a sponge instead of off a table. Her rows stood green and unbroken. She knelt and pushed her fingers through the residue and felt the soil drink. Down the road, 3 tilled quarters had lost their crowns to the ditch. Hers had lost none. The county measured it that fall in one hard figure. Better than 9 tons of soil an acre gone from the plowed ground, and next to nothing from hers. 2 mornings after the cloudburst, a county pickup turned in at the Roush Gate north of Rising City, and Marlon Krebs got out with the drainage order folded in his shirt pocket. He was the district's field man, sent to confirm the mess had been disked under before the 30 days ran out. He stood at the fence and looked a long while before he spoke. "Voss said this ground was a nuisance," he said. "It does not look like a nuisance." Delia Roush met him at the culvert, where the silt off the neighbor's quarter had fanned across the road and stopped at her grass waterway. She said nothing about the letter. She handed him the spade her uncle had left against the post the summer before. Krebs walked out into the standing corn and pushed the blade in with his boot, the same way Alton had. It came up dark and soaked clear through, crumbs holding together with root threads, worm channels running down past the blade. He counted them under his breath, 7 fat ones in a single spade. He crumbled a clod against his palm and felt how it drank the water still sitting in it. He stood back up slow. He took the folded order out of his pocket, looked at it, and put it back without reading a word. "I will tell the board there is no violation here," he said. "This is the only field in the district that kept its dirt." He set the spade back against the post. What was a man supposed to write on an order when the ground had already answered it? The corn came off in October of 2022, and the yield monitor on Delia Rausch's combine held steady where the plowed quarters north of Rising City had thinned in the dry stretch. She was pulling the last round when Garrett Voss's truck stopped at the field road and sat there a while before he got out. He walked the headland with his cap in his hand. His own ground had gullied twice that summer, and the road ditch still wore the fan of his topsoil where the culvert had caught it. He looked at her standing stalks, the residue lying flat and dark between the rows, the ground firm under his boots after a wet week. "That rye," he said. "The radish. What is the mix? What pounds to the acre?" Delia shut the combine down and came around the ladder. She did not gloat. She wrote it on the back of an elevator ticket in pencil. Cereal rye at 50 pounds. Tillage radish at 4. Drilled the second week of September. She handed it over. "Roll it in the spring," she said. "Do not disc it. That is the whole trick." Word moved the way it moves in a county that size, over coffee and across truck beds. 2 more growers along the same road asked that fall. The co-op agronomist who had laughed at her green field now stocked the seed by the pallet and quoted her infiltration numbers as if they were his own. Voss folded the ticket into his shirt pocket and stood looking at the ground a moment longer. The same ground he had once called trash, the paper riding over his heart like something he meant to keep. By the winter of 2023, the gravel roads north of Rising City had gone quiet under the frost, and Delia Rausch sat at the kitchen table with 2 books open under the lamp. One was her grandfather's rain gauge log, 53 years of storms set down in a slow, careful hand. The other was her own. She copied 3 seasons of numbers into the blank pages he had left at the back, closing the gap between them until the 2 hands nearly touched. She turned to the first entry she had ever made, the spring she quit the plow, and read her own words back. Below them, she wrote what the ground did now. Better than 2 inches of rain an hour taken in before a drop ran off. 10 and 12 worms to a spade where once she had found 2. Organic matter come up from 2% to better than 4 in the seasons since her father was buried. Out the window, her field lay the way it had that first June. Last year's stalks flat and gray over the rows. No black dirt turned anywhere on it. The men on the road had called her lazy for it, then careless, then worse. That same field had held every rain since without losing a handful of its dirt. She capped the pencil and set it across the open log. "The ground keeps what you give it and hands it back the day the sky opens." She never argued with the men at the elevator. She let the field answer, and it answered every time. What would you have done with a field everyone told you to plow? Tell us where you are watching from, subscribe, and we will be back next week with another.